So how did we get here? Should we even be involved in any of this? And is there any hope for Ukraine's survival as a nation? Good thing you're at the right show, because I got a chalkboard for you. The United States has a relationship with Ukraine, and it has been an absolute roller coaster of a ride over the years. The difference is night and day between how Joe Biden handled Ukraine versus how President Trump is approaching it. Methinks that maybe one side wanted this war to go on, but that's cynical. That's cynical. But I think it's true. Context now is key to understanding the approaches between Biden and Trump, because so much has happened over the last 17 years, and that's really where this began. I want to start back in 2008. George W. Bush was still in office. Doesn't that seem like a zillion years ago? That's when the United States signed the Ukraine Charter on Strategic Partnership. This is the beginning of the unraveling with Russia. It's a very fancy pants document promising cooperation, trade, security, and democracy. Sounds great, but it is the first brick in what will become a wall of commitment. The State Department is all in, saying they stand by Ukraine as it slowly moves out of Russia's shadow. Now, they keep this formal partnership. It's still going. In fact, they upped it, and I'll tell you more about that. But keep this in mind, because it is the seed for everything that follows. Now, we go to 2009. Here's another big seed. Obama is in office, and according to a State Department cable that later was turned up from WikiLeaks, the U.S. reaffirmed the support for Ukraine's bid to join NATO. So you know, when the wall came down, we promised Russia we would not do that. So they find this to be a very confusing, backstabbing, and hostile move. Doesn't okay anything that they did, but that's the way they viewed it. Now, this is coming just months after Russia's military went in and clashed in Georgia. This becomes more ammunition that Russia uses to claim that NATO is threatening its territory. Meanwhile, they're threatening other people's territory. In 2014, we have the unrest. I love this. I'm going to give you the most politically correct way. The unrest in Kyiv happens because protests just spontaneously erupt. They were kind of egged on by the U.S. State Department. And soon the pro-Russian government is forced out. And we back the new transition to a more Western-friendly government. Now, the U.S. backing this is probably the nicest and most benign way to describe that. I mean, I'm not saying that the State Department was in the area handing out sandwiches to the regime changers or doing courses with that. I'm not saying that, nor would I, and I'm not going to show you the picture of our State Department actually there handing out the sandwiches. Okay, that's the picture of our State Department handing out the sandwiches. We orchestrated all of this. So I did show you the picture, but you shouldn't show that picture to anybody else, because that would be wrong. By the way, you could get the full context of this story with the Democrats' Hydra, episode 3, as part of my Ukrainian specials on Blaze TV, happened a few years ago. It's really critical that you understand this part if you really want to understand why is everybody fighting, what role do we play? We played a very big role. A lot of people don't know that I'm a painter, and I gave up painting because of demoralizing pain in my hands. I was losing hope. If pain keeps you from really living, I urge you to do what I did. Try Relief Factor. Relief Factor is a 100% drug-free supplement developed by doctors. It's safe to take every day, and it has helped me and so many others. You can try their 3-week quick start right now, $19.95 at relieffactor.com. Now, during the first year of this new government, we sent $118 million to the new government. And it was in military aid, not weapons. This is what Trump was saying to Zelenskyy recently. Obama sent you blankets. I sent you missiles. It's true, but it is the beginning of an absolute flood of money to come. Meanwhile, at the same time, Hunter Biden is suddenly handed a sweet, sweet gig that he has no business ever having. He's working now at Burisma, a Ukrainian gas company. And the only kind of gas he's ever had is the one that went, geez, Hunter, stop it. Now, even the New York Times is looking in this one at the time going, he doesn't have any experience or background in the industry of energy. But he was pulling down $50,000 a month to sit on Burisma's board at the same time that Ukraine was part of Joe Biden's assigned responsibility as the vice president. That's where everybody's like, that doesn't look right. And then what happens? About a year later, in December 2015, Joe Biden is in Kyiv, where he pressures Ukraine to fire their prosecutor general, Viktor Shokin. Now, everybody at the time thinks this guy is really good. But the United States is saying he's corrupt. Why did that happen? Again, watch that episode because we show you that we got him fired because he happened to be investigating Burisma. But don't look at any of that. March 2016, he is fired. Then later, Joe Biden brags about his influence on Shokin's firing, saying he threatened to withhold $1 billion in aid. But everybody applauded for that time, and they shouldn't have. That was really bad. And he said, I'm going to hold this money back unless you can Shokin. Now, from 2014 to 2019, the U.S. is training the military forces. Okay, this is where we come in, and then Trump comes in and is like, look, you want to help prepare them, then we can help prepare them. By the end of 2017, Trump's first year in office, he approves the first sale of weapons to Ukraine. We're no longer giving them blankets, we're selling them Javelin missiles. That, of course, developed into a massive headache for Trump. Because what's next? Oh, he does this. And this is going to play a role a little bit later. In March 2019, Ukraine elects a new president. But that was a spontaneous election. We had nothing to do with that. Don't think about the woman handing out sandwiches. The guy they elect is a comedic actor named Volodymyr Zelenskyy. We know him. We love him. 2 months later, the famous phone call between Trump and Zelenskyy happens. And Trump pressed pause on $250 million in military aid because he's like, hey, you should be investigating Joe and Hunter Biden's activities in Ukraine. Remember, Joe Biden said you shouldn't be investigating Burisma, and everybody cheered when he held back $1 billion. This is not $1 billion, and he's saying, what is the connection there? Now, this isn't an unreasonable thing to ask, except Joe Biden is running for president at the time, so the Democrats and the media have a meltdown because how dare you? You're trying to affect the election. You're going after, his main candidate that's running against him, kind of like what the Democrats did later to Donald Trump, but pay no attention. This is all that America hears for a while. Quid pro quo. About 5 billion times over the next 5 months. That's all you hear. Several weeks later, Trump releases the aid to Ukraine, but never mind that, it doesn't matter. Democrats then impeach him in the House. Here's the phone call. The aid is released. Then they impeach Trump for alleged abuse of power. Then what happens? Well, this updated charter, remember this charter? Signed here under George W. Bush. Now we fast forward to November 2021. Biden is president now. Secretary of State Blinken signs an updated Ukrainian charter with the U.S. on a strategic partnership that has even more security promises and support for Ukraine's goal of joining NATO. Do you remember when we get down later when Trump is sitting there with Zelenskyy and Zelensky's like, we need more protection, we need more security. We had it there. Biden updated it. Now he wants even more. That's the problem. Who could have seen this coming? After we do that, 3 months later, Russia does a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Because, what were they saying? You cannot let them go into NATO. This is saying, we're going to let them go into NATO. And this is where Russia goes in. The U.S. money floodgates are opened all the way. According to current State Department numbers, we have given over $100 billion just in military aid to Ukraine to fight Russia. Tanks, missiles, boats, aircraft, you name it. So the war drags on, no end in sight. Nobody's even talking about peace. Then Trump returns and gets back into the White House. There, and it brings us down to April 2022, which then brings us in 2025. Within 3 weeks of this current administration, they are holding talks with Russia in Saudi Arabia. Soon after, Trump brings up a minerals deal with Ukraine. Then comes the meltdown meeting a couple of weeks ago with Zelenskyy in the White House, and even my own family was like, I don't understand that. He treated him like garbage. And I just said this, did you watch the whole thing? Because the first 20, 30 minutes of it, Trump is trying to cajole him, trying to joke about, yeah, I know, that's crazy, we're not going to do any of that. Tries to disarm him. And finally, after about 30 minutes, both he and J.D. Vance just snap. What are you doing? You're playing to the cameras, which is what he always does. In fact, if you remember right, when Biden had him in the White House, he said almost the same thing. Hey, treat us with some respect, because that's his MO. So when everything is in jeopardy, Trump pauses the U.S. military aid and intelligence sharing. Everybody freaks out and says, that's not going to happen. That's a disaster. They'll lose. Well, Trump knows that. And he knows that's going to bring them back to the table, which it did. Last week, a breakthrough. Secretary of State Rubio meets with Ukrainian leaders. They agreed to a 30-day ceasefire with Russia. That is, if Russia eventually agrees to the U.S. proposal. As a result of the successful talks, we resume our military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine. That was just a tool with our very good negotiator. A joint statement also says the U.S. and Ukraine will conclude a deal as soon as possible to develop Ukraine's mineral resources. Russia doesn't want that because now we have stake. We have something in this game. They don't want that because now they know we don't want to lose any of that. You see how this negotiation thing is working? All of this progress over the last month toward ending the war makes you wonder, why wasn't the Biden White House willing to use the same kind of pressure tactics to stop the war? Why, it seems, that they would prefer to keep the war going? Was it their globalist priorities, including maintaining unity with NATO allies? I don't know, could be. And remember, the Biden White House signed that updated Ukrainian charter on strategic partnership. This is just a few months before Russia invaded. To be very clear, Russia's the bad guy here. Russia started all this war that has killed or wounded a combined estimated 1 million soldiers on both sides. Russia did that. But what if the 20th century NATO approach, at least in this conflict, wasn't the most efficient way to resolve it? In hindsight, had our 20th century NATO reflex not kicked in so hard after Russia invaded Ukraine, maybe Europe would have stepped up and took more of a financial burden and things would have ended up differently. I don't know. Maybe Europe would have exerted more pressure to keep Russia from starting a war in NATO's backyard. Probably not, because they have a 75-year track record of total reliance on the U.S. for their security. Now, how did that happen? I got another chalkboard. I got to turn these around. When I come back, I'm going to show you why we got involved with NATO in the first place. And then you have to ask yourself, and I don't know the answer. I know I'm beginning to form an answer, but you have to answer it yourself. Should we even be involved in NATO anymore? Is it worth it? What is it doing? We'll do that next.